wanted to do today was, for the new listeners that are on this channel, is kind of go through a little bit of a summary of where we're at with all of this. Okay, things that we know 100% for sure. We know that Kevin Gaines and David Mack were in Las Vegas the night Tupac was shot. That's 100%, that's verified. We know that Michael Moore heard Gotham come over Reggie's radio when he was standing next to him. And then another voice came over the radio and said, "Don't say nothing over the radio." We know that there are fingerprints of Reggie Wright Sr., Reggie Wright Jr., drug trafficking and money laundering back in the Compton days, in the death row days. And those guys have been arrested on drug trafficking and money laundering today. They've both taken plea deals, and Reggie Wright Jr. is going to be sentenced if he ever actually does any time for this, which, you know, it seems that the people who are cozy with law enforcement or are law enforcement rarely see any consequences here in this life. And the consequences happen to the normal people like you and me. If we try to do anything like that, we would immediately be strung up. And you look at the people that are in this case, like Harry O. Harry O has information. And so while all of the other defendants in the case served their sentences concurrently, when Harry O gets out of his state sentence, the federal government comes and picks him up, and he does a federal stint as well for the same crimes everybody else was treated concurrently. You look at Suge Knight and the way Suge Knight has been targeted in this case. They put him in the nethermost parts of the prison system to silence him because he knows too much. You can give a lot of credit to Ice-T and to Soledad O'Brien, because one thing that they uncovered in their show, and it's not insignificant, it's a big thing. They got into this debate between Reggie Jr. and Suge about whose friends David Mack, Kevin Gaines, and Rafael Perez were. That was an interesting exchange, and it was very significant because that told us something about this. And as we look at this in the context of the entire case, we can see why that was such a big issue between the two of them, because they both know what happened that night. And Suge was in jail at the time. He was local in Los Angeles. I interviewed somebody who was in jail with him who said it would be impossible for him to be on a cell phone orchestrating this. But Reggie wasn't. Reggie was likely at the Petersen Automotive Museum. And in fact, we have images that look very much like Reggie Wright Jr. at the Petersen Automotive Museum that night. And we have a witness who's come forward and said that Reggie orchestrated the entire thing. We have another witness, Kevin Hackey, who's come forward to say Reggie was running around telling everybody that we're going to get big for the Tupac murder. They were selling the fact that Tupac had been killed by Biggie. And that was a big sale, and so they sold it by saying we're going to get the MFs that went after Tupac, and we're going to get Biggie. And so that happened before the Biggie killing actually happened. So you have somebody threatening that there's going to be a murder, and then you have a murder happen. I mean, this isn't tough to put together. We know for a fact that Rafael Perez was on duty at LAPD that night. And we have eyewitnesses saying that he was at the Petersen Automotive Museum that night. We have his own confession that he went over and kicked the shell casings afterwards. He phoned up David Mack or contacted him on a radio, however that happened, and then he said, hey, this thing's in play. David Mack instructed him to go wait. He waited till he heard the shots. Then he came out and secured the crime scene, chased off witnesses, and kicked all the shell casings to contaminate the crime scene. So these are kind of some of the things that we're learning about this case. And so it appears like what Suge said before, that it's the same people involved. You solve one case, you're going to solve the other case. Now, the Biggie case is much easier to solve. So from Rafael Perez's attendance records, we know that he was working at LAPD that night. From David Mack's attendance records, he took the day off, the day of, and the day before the bank robbery. Well, in the Biggie killing, he did the exact same thing. He took a day off, the day of and the day before the Biggie killing. So there was a planning day, and then there was an execution day for both of those crimes. And so the attendance records of Rafael Perez and David Mack tell us something. And we have those two guys also in Las Vegas the night Tupac and Suge are shot. And you have Kevin Gaines, who's taken to the desert, to a hole in the desert by Suge. And we don't know too many of the circumstances. We know Sharitha has confirmed this. We have this in witness statements that the LAPD took, and now we have this in confirmation from Sharitha. And you know, our justice system has a phrase that we have the right to remain silent. And I would just say that some of what we've learned in this case comes from some of the slip-ups that Reggie's made. Reggie made a huge slip-up by saying that he had a lot to cover up. And we have that. There's a soundbite that exists on that. Reggie has also made other big mistakes. He made a mistake the other night talking about Johnny J's murder and not his suicide. And so these slip-ups will continue as long as Reggie talks. And you know what? It's great that he's talking. Let him keep talking. And he just keeps digging himself deeper and deeper and deeper into this hole. And what we see is the LAPD has a lot to cover up, and they have covered up. You can look at the previous videos we've seen. It would be very expensive for the city of Los Angeles and the LAPD if they were found liable for these murders. This would lead to a microscope on the LAPD and all of the cases that these corrupt cops touched, which need to be looked at because there are innocent men and women sitting in prison. And we're coming up on the deadline of submitting cases to me. I want to try and get a report out. I want to start digging into what these cases are with y'all, because there are some compelling cases right now that we're looking into. And it all ties back to the Snoop evidence going missing that Kevin Gaines had access to. He was at Pacific Division. He knew how the evidence locker worked. There was likely an operation, and it was probably with radios and the whole thing. There was probably distraction. They probably picked a lock. However that happened, late at night, or somehow they went into the evidence locker. They stole the shell casings and the bloody clothing of Philip Waldemariam, and that case got derailed, and Snoop was acquitted. And you know what's crazy is that as much as they did for Snoop to get him acquitted, he turned on them. And isn't that just a classic of how these things go? When somebody gets acquitted in a case like this, and it didn't look good for him. You have Reggie bragging to Kevin Hackey that they stole the evidence out of the evidence locker, and then you have the evidence turning up missing. And so we're seeing this pattern. One of the other things that we see in these cases is witness intimidation. And we see it with the Snoop murder trial. You had Compton PD and LAPD going out and intimidating witnesses. And we see it in the El Rey theater. You know, the beating of Kelly Jamerson. You see that the witnesses there were intimidated. You see it in the Mark Anthony Bell case. You see it in the Tupac and the Biggie cases. You have Reggie, who rides with every single witness from death row that goes up to Las Vegas, and he sits in on the interviews, intimidating the witnesses. And we can even see that playing out today. You can see Reggie and Greg Kading trying to intimidate and what have you, Eugene Deal. And they've also tried to an extent to do it with me. Oh, we're going to say bad things about you, everybody tune in. And they should just realize that the more they do stuff like that with certain people, the more we just double down. And you know, it's not about me at this case. Russell Poole is dead, Buntree is dead, Heron is dead, Gaddafi is dead, Fatal is dead. I mean, we have Big Psych is dead. We have so many people in these cases that are dead. Tupac is dead, Biggie is dead, Bobby Finch is dead. There are so many murders that have happened in these cases, and people that have strange circumstances around their deaths, like Michael Moore and Frank Alexander. And so this has become more than just about one person. It's not about me anymore. It's about all of this blood that is crying out of the ground for justice. And it's about all of these innocent people that are sitting in prison that are crying out for justice. And so these cases and every single case that the corrupt officers touched need to be looked into, and the cover-up needs to be exposed and stopped. We're getting close. Keep tuning in. We have more information we're going to be digging into. Thank you again to Bob, who's given quite a bit of information on these cases, and we will continue. Anybody else that has information out there, please send it over. Your clues are important, and the more this crowd gets into the case, the better it's going to be for justice, and we need all of your help. Again, thank you, and welcome to the new listeners that are just tuning in. This has been just kind of a little bit of a summary.